Nietzsche didn't write this to motivate you. He wrote it as a warning, because sometimes what doesn't kill you deforms you. It makes you more cynical, colder, more distant from life. And if you don't know what you're up against, you won't come out the other side in one piece. The truth is that Nietzsche's philosophy is not about cute overcoming or self-help phrases. It's about existential brutality, about the collapse of illusions, about a world where only the emotionally lucid, and not the morally pure, survive without becoming slaves to lies. Many people read Nietzsche and get it wrong. You think he was just an atheist provocateur, an empty nihilist, a philosopher of chaos. But the truth is that Nietzsche didn't want to destroy everything. He wanted to reveal it, show the hidden gears behind morals, compassion, and social structures. He didn't write to console. He wrote to wake up. And what he revealed are 7 cruel truths that few people have the courage to face. Truths that don't make you smile, but make you see. And once you see it, there's no going back. Friedrich Nietzsche was not just a controversial philosopher. He was a breakout, an intellectual earthquake that still haunts the foundations of morality, religion, and Western thought today. The son of a Lutheran pastor, he began his career as a young prodigy. At the age of 24, he was already a university professor. But rather than follow in the footsteps of academic prestige, Nietzsche chose solitude. He rejected the comfort of institutions and plunged into a brutal search for the truth, even if it drove him crazy, and took it. Nietzsche is hated by some and worshipped by others precisely for this reason. He did not offer easy hope. He didn't sell promises. He pointed to the abyss and said that was where the truth lived. While others spoke of virtue, he spoke of power. While others urged compassion, he spoke of the will to dominate. He believed that behind every noble morality, there was a play of forces, that behind all the altruism, there was interest, that even love could be a disguised form of control. Nietzsche did not want to create chaos. He wanted to reveal who survives inside him. Its central thesis is as simple as it is devastating. Morality is not an absolute truth. It is a survival strategy. Those who cannot win in the field of physical strength, intellect, or will invent rules to stop the strong. They create codes, narratives, and institutions to level the playing field. And so, the weak rule. The discomfort that Nietzsche causes comes precisely from there. He rips off the masks. He shows that many of the ideas we call good, just, or humane were actually created to tame the human spirit. He didn't hate morals because he was cynical. He hated her because she stifled the potential for greatness. Nietzsche's philosophy is not an invitation to destruction, but to lucidity. And in this video, we'll traverse the minefield of his most dangerous ideas, those that aren't taught in the classroom, but are silently shaping the real world. Rule 1. Morality is a mastery strategy. Most people believe that morals are something pure, a type of internal compass that guides us towards what is right and away from evil. But Nietzsche believed this was an illusion, a dangerous illusion. For him, morality was not born from kindness, but from weakness. It was not created by the strong to protect the weak. It was created by the weak to neutralize the strong. Imagine a group of people who don't have enough physical strength, social power, or courage to face their enemies head-on. What is left for them? Invent a new way to win. And this is exactly what Nietzsche calls slave morality, a system of values created not by those who can act freely, but by those who need to defend themselves from the freedom of others. Instead of exalting strength, they glorify submission. Instead of admiring courage, they praise humility. Instead of celebrating autonomy, they canonize sacrifice. Therefore, Nietzsche differentiates between 2 types of morality: the morals of the gentleman and the morals of slaves. The first is affirmative. It arises from the vital impulse, from action, from creative force. You say, "This is good," because it is in accordance with your power. The morality of slaves is reactive. She doesn't create, she responds. The slave looks at the master and says, "This is bad." And by contrast, he defines himself as good. It is a morality based on resentment. Religion, for Nietzsche, was the great engineer of this process. Christianity, in particular, is the institutionalized morality of the weak. A system that elevated guilt to the status of virtue, where suffering is a sign of nobility, where forgiving is more important than reacting, where the poor, humble, and submissive are blessed, and the powerful are tempted by sin. The Christian paradise is, for Nietzsche, the greatest psychological scam ever invented. A fantasy constructed to console the powerless and keep the powerful under moral surveillance. But it's not just in religion. This pattern is repeated in politics, education, and corporations, in the entire control structure. Just look at how modern institutions promote a moral discourse that praises absolute equality, obedience, and self-restraint. This all sounds nice, until you realize that it serves one thing: to prevent the individual from becoming too dangerous, too strong, too free. Nietzsche saw this morality as a kind of symbolic castration, something that prevents the flourishing of the authentic individual. Because, deep down, morality is not interested in your growth. She wants predictability, and predictability is only possible when people follow the same rules, believe in the same virtues, and behave in the same way. The different threatens. The strong bothers. The free is scary. Therefore, Nietzsche said that the greatest sin was not breaking the rules. It was creating your own. The modern world does not fear evil. He fears autonomy. The man who thinks for himself, who acts without asking permission, who doesn't blame himself for being who he is. That man cannot be controlled. And therefore, it needs to be labeled. Arrogant, selfish, narcissistic, toxic. Morality then became a sophisticated code of social domination. An invisible mechanism that makes people limit themselves on their own. You don't need physical prisons when your mind is already caged by ideas of right and wrong that were never chosen, only inherited. Nietzsche is not saying that all morality is useless. He's saying that if you don't question the origins of your values, you've already lost the game. Because maybe you're living a life shaped by ideals designed to keep you docile, predictable, and small. The question that Nietzsche forces us to ask is, who wrote your moral code? And most importantly, does it strengthen you or tame you? Rule 2. Everything is the will to power. Nietzsche believed that behind every human action, there is a hidden force, a force deeper than the search for happiness, more instinctive than the struggle for survival, more real than any moral ideal. He called her will to power. This is not the desire to dominate others, as many interpret in a simplistic way. It is the desire to assert oneself, to expand, to become more. It is the force that moves the artist to create, the thinker to break old ideas, the warrior to risk his own life, the scientist to challenge the limits of knowledge. The will to power, according to Nietzsche, is the vital impulse that runs through all living things, a deep desire to intensify one's own existence. But what does this mean in practice? It means that even the noblest gestures, charity, sacrifice, forgiveness, can, deep down, be expressions of the will to power. An act of donation may be driven by a desire for moral superiority. An apology can be a strategy for maintaining emotional control over someone. A speech about justice can hide political ambition. Nietzsche forces us to ask an uncomfortable question. What is behind what seems virtuous? The will to power has no morals. She just is. It can express itself as brute force or subtle manipulation, like a pious speech or a declaration of war, like feigned submission or explicit boldness. And that's what makes everything more complex. There is no purity of intention. Human beings do not act from high principles. They act to exert influence, presence, strength. Even if unconsciously, even self-boycott for Nietzsche can be an act of distorted will to power. When someone sabotages themselves to attract attention, when they martyr themselves to manipulate someone else's guilt, when they feign weakness to obtain protection, this is also a way of dominating the environment, an inverted power game. This idea overturns the romanticism of intentions once and for all, because it shows us that even morality, compassion, and humility can be tools to control others. Nietzsche called this reactive morality, a morality born of resentment, fear, impotence. It does not affirm life. She tries to contain those who claim her. And the most dangerous thing, the will to power does not disappear when it is repressed. It just changes shape. If it cannot express itself in creation, it expresses itself in criticism. If it cannot act, it judges. If it cannot conquer, it sabotages. A frustrated individual doesn't stop wanting power. He just tries to prevent others from having it. This is why Nietzsche saw resentment as a psychological poison. It is the result of a frustrated will to power that, instead of creating, is dedicated to destroying. The resentful person doesn't just want to win, he wants to see the other person fail. And he often does this using the tools most accepted by society: moral judgment, selective outrage, victim narrative. In other words, the power game does not just happen in meeting rooms or on the stages of political power. It is in everyday conversations, on social media, in relationships. It is everywhere where human beings try to influence, control, or protect themselves. But Nietzsche did not see this as something to be condemned. He believed that the will to power was the essence of life, and that repressing this impulse made us sick. The problem is not wanting power. The problem is lying to yourself about it, pretending we are pure when we are just wearing a more acceptable mask. Nietzsche's proposal is different. Recognize your will to power. Don't run away from it. Don't disguise it as kindness or spirituality. Use it conscientiously. Channel it to create, to affirm, to become someone who grows, who transforms, who elevates. Because in the end, there is no neutrality. Every action carries power or submission. Every choice reveals who is in control, you, or the unconscious forces you pretend not to see. Everything is the will to power. The only question is, are you directing this force, or are you being directed by it? Rule 3. Truth alone doesn't matter. We live under the illusion that the world rewards those who are right. It is enough to have good arguments, solid evidence, and genuine intentions for the truth to win. But Nietzsche believed something much darker, and, unfortunately, truer. The truth, by itself, has no power. What matters is not what is true, but who imposes the narrative. For him, the world is not governed by reason, but by will to impose. And that changes everything. Because in practice, the story is not told by the most lucid, it is told by the most daring. Facts don't win debates. Presence wins. Logic does not convince the masses. Charisma does. Clarity doesn't command crowds. Emotional impact does. Nietzsche is not saying that truth does not exist. He is saying that she not enough. The mistake idealists make is thinking that being right is enough. But the world is a field of forces, not of facts. The winner is not the one who points out the truth. It is the one who shapes it, packages it, communicates it with enough force for it to be accepted. And that's why manipulators dominate so much space. They don't have to be right. They just need to appear confident. Just observe what happens in public debates, in political speeches, on social networks. Whoever has narrative control wins, not whoever has philosophical depth. The influencer wins over the intellectual. The slogan wins over the analysis. Repetition wins over reflection. Nietzsche saw this as a brutal reflection of reality. Human beings do not seek truth. They seek security, belonging, meaning. And those who offer this, even with lies, have more power than those who present uncomfortable truths. In other words, the world is more theatre than court. And on that stage, those who don't learn to act disappear. This doesn't mean you have to lie to win, but it does mean that if you want to live authentically without being swallowed up by the system, you need to learn to wear your truth with armor. Being true is not enough. You need to be strategically true, knowing when to speak, how to speak, with what tone, in what context. Nietzsche warns us against naive idealism, against the idea that good wins in the end, or that facts always appear. No, the facts are silent every day. The lucid voices are buried in silence. And the naive who believe that you just need to be right end up bitter, frustrated, forgotten. The truth is fragile, and if it is not supported by symbolic force, presence, persuasion, it becomes irrelevant. Just think of historical figures who were right, but who were destroyed because they were weak in the game of power. Galileo was silenced, Socrates poisoned, Jesus crucified. In all these cases, the truth was present, but the power structure was stronger. And this applies to everyday life too. How many times have you said the right thing, with the right data, with total honesty, and still lost? How many times have you been ignored for being subtle and seen someone else receive applause for repeating banalities with more force? Nietzsche saw this scenario not as a tragedy, but as a calling, a warning to stop thinking the world is fair. The world doesn't reward truth, it rewards narrative mastery. And if you want to live freely, lucidly, and with integrity, you need to stop being a spectator and learn to play. Nietzsche's philosophy does not invite lying, invites to strength of expression, to master yourself, the ability to make your truth heard in a world that only listens to those who scream. Because as he himself said, reason is a prostitute, it serves the strongest. In other words, even logic can be bent, manipulated, used as a tool of power. It's not enough to be right. It is necessary be dangerous enough to be heard. Nietzsche didn't want a world of cynics. He wanted lucid individuals, that they understood that truth has no power without presence, that justice is a construction, not a destination, and that freedom only exists when you stop expecting recognition and start acting with brutal awareness of reality. The truth does not set you free. The truth, when you're alone, is just another victim of the game. And in this game, you either play with awareness or you are thrown out of it. Rule 4. Suffering is the forge of the strong. We live in a culture obsessed with comfort. We avoid discomfort like an illness. We numb the pain with distractions, medications, quick pleasures. We run away from sadness as if it were failure, and we treat suffering as something that needs to be immediately eliminated. Nietzsche thought the opposite. For him, suffering is not a mistake in life. It is its fertile ground. It is in pain that lucidity, strength, greatness are born. He believed that the deepest souls are shaped not by pleasure, but by the intensity of what they endure without falling apart. Suffering, for Nietzsche, is like a furnace, and it is there that common men melt, and great men turn into steel. He said, "What doesn't kill me makes me stronger." But this phrase, so misunderstood, is not an invitation to cheap positivity. She is a brutal reminder. Life will crush you, and you only become stronger if you learn to bear the weight with integrity. It is not the absence of suffering that makes someone extraordinary. It's what that person does with it. Nietzsche observed that humanity's greatest works, in art, philosophy, science, were born out of discomfort, from frustration, from the internal struggle. He believed that there is a deep alchemy between pain and transcendence. This is not about romanticizing suffering, but about recognize your role as a forger of consciousness. The problem is that, in modern times, we have been taught to interpret pain as failure. When something hurts, we think something is wrong. But Nietzsche offers us another lens. What if it's just the opposite? What if it is in pain that life gives us the most transformative lessons? What if running away from suffering is what keeps us small? Pain, when faced with courage, reveals truths that pleasure never delivers. It rips off masks, destroys illusions, and forces you to face yourself without filters. And that is why Nietzsche believed that only those who have suffered deeply can look at life with authentic eyes. Only those who have crossed the internal desert understand the importance of creating their own oasis. He was an example of that. He faced debilitating illnesses, social isolation, intellectual rejection, and ultimately, a mental breakdown. But even in the face of all this, he never gave in to victimhood. On the contrary, he dived even deeper. I wasn't looking for comfort. I was looking for meaning. And this quest led him to write some of the most challenging and revolutionary ideas in history. Nietzsche wrote that humanity's problem is not suffering. It is senseless suffering. When we don't understand pain, it destroys us. When we see it as a process of transformation, it strengthens us. Meaning does not eliminate suffering, but it redeems it. It gives form to chaos, towards despair, purpose for the fall. And this is where he introduces the concept of Übermensch, the beyond man. Not as a perfect being, but as one who overcomes. That rises, that turns every pain into power, who does not use suffering as an excuse, but as a mortar for his own reconstruction. Nietzsche saw in modern culture an infantilization of the soul, a refusal to mature through pain. We live surrounded by emotional anesthesia, social networks, digital distractions, ideologies of comfort. Everything to avoid the silence where pain screams. But it is in this scream that strength begins to emerge. What he proposed was brutally simple. Stop running away, face it. Feel, support, rearrange your life not to avoid suffering, but to make it useful. If pain is going to find you, and it will, unless it finds you standing up, with your head held high and your spirit ready to bear the weight. Nietzsche knew this was difficult. That few would accept this proposal, because it doesn't promise consolation. It requires courage, but it is also the only one that offers real transformation. Because in the end, what destroys a man is not what he suffers. It is his refusal to learn from what he has suffered. The suffering that tears you up inside can be the same one that reveals you completely. And that choice, to forge yourself or break yourself, will always be yours. Pain is not the end. She is the fire. And you decide whether it will be grey or sword. Rule 5. Society hates the exceptional. We live in an age that preaches equality as the supreme virtue. Everyone should be treated the same way, think alike, follow the same paths, maintain the same tone. The word exception seems almost offensive, but Nietzsche saw something much darker in this obsession with equality than it seems. A collective strategy to crush greatness. According to him, mediocrity not only survives, it organizes itself. She creates systems, narratives, and institutions to contain everything that challenges her. And what challenges you most? The exceptional. He who thinks differently, who acts without asking permission, who refuses to follow the herd. This type of individual, the one who dares to stand out, quickly becomes a target. Nietzsche stated that the exceptional man, the creator, the free man, is seen as a threat by those who live trapped by the morality of the herd. Because he breaks the rule not to cause chaos, but to live with intensity. He shows, with his simple existence, that it is possible not to bend. And that bothers you, because it exposes the conformity of others. This is why society has developed sophisticated means of covert control. We no longer burn heretics, but we cancel dissidents. We don't hang anyone who thinks differently, but we ridicule, we silence, we exclude. The court of public opinion has replaced medieval bonfires. But the goal is the same: keep everyone on the same level, suffocate anyone who threatens to rise. Nietzsche saw this clearly, and not by theory, but by experience. He was ridiculed, ignored, rejected by his peers. While writing ideas that now shape contemporary thought, he was treated as a delusional eccentric. And why? Because it didn't fit. Because he refused to repeat himself. Because he said what no one wanted to hear. The truth, according to Nietzsche, is that most people don't want freedom. They want belonging. And the price of belonging is mediocrity. It's about accepting to prune the brightest parts of yourself so as not to offend, not bother, not overtake others. But the exceptional man cannot live like that. He can't stand being tamed. And for that, he pays the price. Live more alone. It is misunderstood and often hated. Not because it does evil, but because it represents an uncomfortable mirror for those who prefer not to look. Nietzsche said, "He who has a reason to live can endure almost anything." But the problem is that the more intense this reason, the more he moves away from the crowd, because the crowd doesn't understand those who build their own route. She fears, she attacks. And here comes a fundamental point of Nietzsche's philosophy. Most are not references to anything. What is common is not necessarily what is right. What is accepted is not necessarily what is true. Often, it's the opposite. Because society's value systems are created to protect stability, not truth, not freedom, Nietzsche invites us to make a difficult choice: be accepted or be authentic. And he makes it clear that authenticity comes at a high price. You will be annoying. It will be rejected. You will walk alone. But he will walk with his head held high and with his whole soul. Society hates the exceptional because the exceptional reveals how dormant it is. A free man, when he emerges, destroys the excuses of all those who live bent. He shows that servitude is a choice, and for that reason, it needs to be silenced. But Nietzsche believed that there is beauty in this solitude, a strength that only arises when you stop asking for approval and start living by your own rule. The exceptional man does not need to win on the world's terms. He just needs, don't betray yourself. Because in the end, true failure is not being rejected by society. It's becoming like her. Society hates the exceptional because the exceptional forces it to wake up. And few have the courage to open their eyes. Rule 6. Self-illusion is your prison. The most dangerous lie is not the one we hear from others. That's what we tell ourselves. Nietzsche believed that the greatest human prison is built with sweet words, convenient justifications, and comforting illusions. It's not the walls outside that keep us chained. It's the silent agreements we make with our own cowardice. And among all the ego's defense mechanisms, he saw the car illusion as the most insidious. Why? Because it makes us live within a false narrative, but one that seems true. It protects us from the pain of facing who we really are, how much we stopped being, what we stopped trying. It's like a foggy mirror that we show ourselves every day, pretending that we can still see ourselves. Self-delusion takes subtle forms. I'm just like that. It didn't work because the world is unfair. I even wanted to change, but now is not the time. Phrases that, on the outside, seem reasonable. But inside, there are bars. Nietzsche had no patience for this kind of lie. For him, lying to yourself is the first step to decay, because when you build your identity on excuses, any real growth becomes impossible. You cannot evolve without first destroying the illusions that justify your stagnation. And why do we do this? Because it's easier. Because looking in the mirror and recognizing I'm sabotaging myself requires a courage that few are willing to cultivate. It is more comfortable to blame others, the system, society, childhood, bad luck. It is easier to wear the victim's mask than to bear the weight of responsibility. But Nietzsche saw this as a form of spiritual weakening. For him, true strength begins where lies end. When the individual stops romanticizing their own pain, glorifying their own impotence, and starts facing the facts, no matter how painful they may be. He wrote that resentment arises precisely from there. from people who cannot deal with their own failures, and that is why they make the world guilty. The envious person who criticizes the successful, the lazy man who despises ambition, the coward who accuses courage of recklessness. All this is self-delusion, turned into morality. But perhaps the cruelest aspect of this prison is time, because the more you repeat a lie to yourself, the more it seems like the truth. The mind adapts, the body settles, and when you realize you've already built an entire life around ideas that you didn't even choose, you just accepted out of emotional convenience, Nietzsche invites us to do something radical, distrusting everything we tell ourselves when we are afraid. The stories that emerge when we fail, the excuses that appear when we postpone, the rationalizations we create to not move. Each one is an invisible wall, and the more beautiful it looks, the more dangerous it is. But how to escape this prison? Nietzsche believed that there is only one way, the inner truth, not the absolute truth, but the truth about your current state. Are you living consistently with what you believe? Are you making decisions based on power or fear? Are you being honest about your limits, or just using them as a crutch? This kind of sincerity is painful, but it's also liberating, because it clears the land, breaks down the walls, and it puts you back at the center of your life. You stop living as a spectator of your own existence and start acting like an author. Nietzsche said, "The lie that holds you back is the one you believe." And most people are not bound by external chains. She is trapped by phrases that she repeats every day without realizing it. Phrases that prevent risk, change, rebirth. The process of self-illumination for him was a process of self-destruction, in the best sense. Destroy the false self, false virtues, the false limits, and thus release what is most authentic, the desire to become more than you are now. Self-delusion makes you live like a spectre, a character written by ancient fears. But lucidity, even if it comes with pain, gives you back the key to the cell. You may keep repeating lies to protect yourself, or you can face the truth and actually start living. Rule 7. Become your own God. Nietzsche didn't want you to follow leaders, not gurus, nor eternal truths. His most radical and most dangerous ideal was simple to understand, but devastating in its consequences. Become your own God. This idea, taken from the concept of Superman, beyond man, is often misinterpreted. It has nothing to do with arrogance. It's not about feeling superior to others. It's about breaking away from all inherited truths and creating your own. It's about abandoning the crutch of external authority and taking the risk of existing alone. Nietzsche believed that God died, but not as an act of religious disrespect. He was not celebrating the death of a divine being. It was pointing to the death of an idea. The idea that someone from the outside still dictates right and wrong, possible and impossible, sacred and profane. When he says God is dead, he means the modern world no longer truly believes in ancient values, but it still lives as if it does. This contradiction creates a void, and what Nietzsche proposes is that you fill it not with ready-made new beliefs, but with creative autonomy, with the courage to invent your own morals, your own symbols, their own meanings. But doing so requires something rare, the willingness to destroy everything you have been conditioned to be. Becoming your own God is looking inside and recognizing that no one will come to save you, that there is no path already mapped out, that there is no guaranteed destiny. There is only you, your choices, and the chaos of existence. And in that void, you are called to rise up, not as a follower, but as a creator. Nietzsche via O Superman, as one who can transform suffering into strength, instinct into consciousness, and chaos into form. Someone who, faced with the absurdity of life, does not sink into despair, but stands up and says, "I make sense of this." He doesn't run away from reality. he transforms it with his own style, his own rules, his own rhythm. This is being your own God. Do not worship external idols. Don't live under the shadow of other people's myths. But be the founder of his own inner temple. But be careful. Nietzsche never said this would be easy. He knew that most people don't want freedom. You want security. Most want to be commanded, not create. Because creating requires total responsibility. You can no longer blame anyone. Don't expect anything. You are the judge and the creator, the sculptor and the marble. This responsibility is so great that most people prefer to run away from it. That's why so many surrender to doctrines, systems, ideologies, parties, spiritual gurus. Because it's easier to repeat than to create. Easier to obey than to question. Easier to believe than to take the risk of thinking for yourself. Nietzsche despised this voluntary submission. For him, true freedom isn't doing whatever you want. It's being able to create your own rules, to live as if it were a work of art in constant construction. He said that the human being is something that must be overcome, that the mission of life is not to find meaning, it is to give meaning. And giving meaning requires a rupture. You will have to kill your internal gods, those you inherited from childhood, from society, from religion, from culture. Those who still live in your head, telling you what is right, what is beautiful, what is permitted. Only then will there be room for you to build an altar to your own spirit. Being your own God is, deep down, no longer bow down to anything that has not been chosen by you. It is living with total presence and total authorship. It's knowing that no one can give you permission to be who you are, except yourself. Nietzsche knew that this path is lonely, but it is also the only one that leads to true greatness, because everything that comes from outside can be taken away, but what you create for yourself, that no one can touch. So the question he leaves is straightforward. You want to keep asking for permission to exist, or are you ready to become the creator of your own life? Because in the end, it's not about worshipping a god, it's about become one. Nietzsche never wanted to comfort you. He did not write to calm the spirit. He wrote to wake him up, to uproot your certainties and force you to face life without filters, without veils, without moral crutches. He knew that the naked truth is unbearable for most, but that is where real freedom begins. These 7 truths you heard here are not ready-made phrases to post on social media. They are blades, cut deep. Deconstructing morality, facing suffering, rejecting imposed equality, breaking with self-illusion, living without seeking approval, and finally, daring to create your own values, is not easy. It's not pretty. It's not easy. But it's that or prison. Nietzsche was not a prophet of chaos. He was an architect of a new consciousness, one that said, in other words, either you wake up, or you continue to be used by those who have already woken up. You can keep repeating the same patterns, asking for validation, hiding behind ideas you didn't choose, or you can face the brutal cost of lucidity. Yes, the price is high, but the stakes are even greater. It's autonomy. Nietzsche didn't want followers. I wanted arsonists, people willing to set fire to their own masks. People willing to no longer obey, not even him. In the end, he gives you the choice. Continue asking for permission, or decide, once and for all, who you are going to be.